Hi, everyone. I'm Robert Waggoner, and I'm very happy to be here at the invitation of World of Lucid Dreaming to provide some information about the history, the brief history of lucid dreaming, because there's a vast history to lucid dreaming here. So what I'm going to do first is just have a little presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions. And the questions can be about whatever you're interested in, as long as it has to do with lucid dreaming. Also, you're welcome to put questions into the chat because this is going to be recorded. And if you don't want to be seen on camera, then that's how you'll have to go about it. So I'm going to share my screen here and just begin to talk a little bit about the brief history of lucid dreaming. So again, I'm Robert Waggoner, and this is done in association with the World of Lucid Dreaming. One thing that I did want to say about this early history of lucid dreaming, when we think about it, is that the modern science of lucid dreaming is now 49 years old. And that's because on April 12th, 1975, in a sleep laboratory at the University of Hull, Keith Hearn, the grad student, had brought Alan Worsley into his lab and put the rapid eye movement polygraph pads on his eyes and asked him to signal by moving his eyes left to right 7 or 8 times to show that he was consciously aware within the dream. And so if you go to keithhearn.com, you can read a lot about that particular event, and you can see the first rapid eye movement readout polygraph paper, and it's really exciting to think about that. I myself have been on the podium with Keith Hearn before at Lucid Dreaming conferences, and also I've met Alan Worsley as well, and really a very talented lucid dreamer. So again, go to keithhearn.com to learn more about that. And it's really wonderful, though, to think about that back in April of 1975, because that is also when I taught myself how to lucid dream. I was in high school at the time, and I was reading a book by Carlos Castaneda called Journey to Ixtlan. And in that book, his shamanic teacher, Don Juan, suggests to him that he find his hands in the dream state and become lucidly aware. And so there really wasn't a technique. And so I knew about the power of suggestion. And so I just basically created my own technique, and within 3 days had my first lucid dream. And so that was a lot of fun to think that that occurred basically the same time that Keith Hearn and Alan Worsley were working in the sleep lab at the University of Hull in the UK. Now, a lot of people, of course, when they think of lucid dreaming, they think of Stephen LaBerge. And Stephen LaBerge, of course, like Keith Hearn, has written a number of books. The interesting thing, and the historically more accurate item, is that Stephen LaBerge began his PhD research on this topic of lucid dreaming and began his own personal experiments in the sleep lab about 2 years after Keith Hearn and Alan Worsley had that experience. And so we always want to keep that in mind, that even though we oftentimes think of Stephen LaBerge as one of the primary people in lucid dreaming history, he's not the first in terms of this scientific aspect of recording a lucid dream while aware within the dream state in a sleep laboratory. And you can see that Stephen LaBerge completed his thesis, Lucid Dreaming, an Exploratory Study of Consciousness During Sleep, in 1980. And it was the 2 years before that, he brought himself into the sleep lab. And I think he did more than 20 experiments or 20 sessions where he could show that he was moving his eyes left to right a certain number of times and showing that he indeed was aware within the lucid dream. LaBerge, of course, says that he independently came up with this idea of using his eyes to signal. And it's interesting that both Keith Hearn and Stephen LaBerge had that same idea. But there's more to the history of lucid dreaming than just that beginning episode back in the late 70s of people consciously signaling. There's also a little bit of controversy about the term lucid dreaming and who was the first person to suggest this term. And so it's interesting to see this piece by Frederick von Eden, who was a mystical scientist or a scientist mystic from the Netherlands, Frederick van Eden. And not only did he, according to some people, coin the term lucid dreaming, but he also coined the term psychotherapy and actually some other terms as well. But they considered him both kind of a scientist and a little bit of a mystic as well. So he wrote in one of his publications that he noticed that there were 7 different types of dreams. And so he says, the 7th type of dream, which I call lucid dreams, seems to me the most interesting and worthy of the most careful observation and study. Of this type, I experienced and wrote down 352 cases in the period between January 20th, 1898 and December 26, 1912. In these lucid dreams, the reintegration of the psychic functions is so complete that the sleeper remembers day life and his own condition, reaches a state of perfect awareness, and is able to direct his attention and to attempt different acts of free volition. Yet the sleep, as I am able confidently to state, is undisturbed, deep and refreshing. I obtained my first glimpse of this lucidity during sleep in June 1987. So of course he's writing this after 1912, and it's interesting also to think that around that time, it was 1899, 1900, is when Sigmund Freud came out with his book, The Interpretation of Dreams, which initially didn't sell very well, but he kept promoting it. And I think by this time, Sigmund Freud was known in the European dream community. Now, some people really doubt if Frederick van Eden was the first person to use the term lucid dreams, because they can point to another book that was published anonymously in 1867 in France. And that book is by the Marquis de Hervé de Saint-Denis, called in French, the French translation, Dreams and the Ways to Direct Them, Practical Observations. And so there's a number of English translations of this book. There's a short version and then there's a complete version. But what you learn by taking a look at this book is that, excuse me, while I admit people, what you learn when you take a look at this book is that this Marquis was incredibly talented at lucid dreaming. And in fact, not only was he talented at lucid dreaming, he was also conducting his own personal experiments in the lucid dream state to see about influencing the lucid dream, about dealing with dream objects and various things. And it's really quite fascinating to read some of his works. But similarly, it's interesting to read some of the works of Frederick von Eden. I recall one of the lucid dream reports that Frederick von Eden reported was that he met a deceased brother-in-law who warned Frederick van Eden in the lucid dream that he was going to lose a sizable amount of money if he wasn't careful. And Frederick van Eden thought this was interesting when he woke up, because at that time he didn't have the amount of money that his deceased brother-in-law warned him about. But later I believe he received an inheritance, He put all the money into railroad stocks, and then railroad stocks collapsed, and he did indeed lose a lot of money, just as his deceased brother-in-law told him in a lucid dream. But again, 30 or 40 years before Frederick Van Eden, we have the Marquis de Hervé de Saint-Denis. And if you click around, you can find about him, and you can read free online versions, translated into English, of course, of his particular work. Now, the beautiful thing about lucid dreaming is that it goes on beyond that. The history for lucid dreaming is just truly vast. And so when you start to look into it, you realize that Aristotle, about 2,500 years ago, in a brief piece entitled On Dreams, he had this particular line: "Often when one is asleep, there is something in consciousness which declares that what then presents itself is but a dream." And so back in those times of ancient Greece and the philosophers, you can see examples of them becoming aware within the dream state. And sometimes it was because they would see a deceased person. Sometimes it would be because they'd see someone who lived very far away, and they thought, how can they be here? Oh, I'm dreaming this. And that's how they became lucidly aware. But even Aristotle reported that he had had lucid dreams and gave examples. Also, if you have an interest, there's the letters of St. Augustine. I think that's what I want to have there. I apologize. I wrote in St. Constantine, but it's letter 159 in the letters. And the beautiful thing there is you can read a lovely lucid dream. It's about a physician whose name was Gennardius, and he lived in Carthage at the time, and he was one of the early Christians there in the 4th century. But Gennardius was a doctor, and he knew that bodies, after they died, they basically deteriorated out there in the desert conditions to basically nothing but bleached bones. And so Gennardius was wondering, how can a person be resurrected? How can there be a resurrection, as the Christian philosophy at the time was suggesting? So one night, he sees this radiant youth, and then he wakes up and, oh, it was just a dream. The next night, he sees the same radiant youth, and now the radiant youth asks him, when did we meet before? And Gennardius realizes, oh, we met in last night's dream. And then the youth ask him, with what eyes do you see me? Are basically asking him, where are you now? And Gennardius realizes that he's sleeping in bed and this is a dream. And then the radiant youth ask him, with what eyes do you see me now? And Gennardius doesn't know how to respond to that. How can he be having this conscious experience in the dream state and seeing this radiant youth? And then the radiant youth goes on to explain to him that after death, there's a facility of perception that allows people to perceive. And so therefore, he shouldn't worry about the physical body out there in the desert being dissolved and all, that this is all taken care of. Now, if you read the book by Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, The Tibetan Yogas of Dream and Sleep, there he talks about Buddhist dream yoga, which has been a philosophy and an approach to Buddhist philosophy for almost 2,000 years. But in that book, the author brings up that there's been shamans that predated Buddhism. And for example, the Tibetan Bon shamans, he said that he felt that for 8,000 years, they have a tradition of lucid dreaming. So that's interesting. Also, you'll see in Sufism, the mystical branch of Islam, there's a tradition of lucid dreaming. And it's kind of fun to read some of the works of Ibn al-Arabi. He was from the 11th century Spain, who was a Muslim, and he was very talented at lucid dreaming and wrote some wonderful books about this particular way of connecting to the divine, which would be their approach. In Taoism, there's secret societies that are involved in lucid dreaming at all. And the wonderful thing is you start to realize that there's many native traditions worldwide that talk about lucid dreaming. Here in North America, the Blackfeet tribe, they have a society that uses lucid dreaming. But of course, if you're not part of that secret society, then you're not connected to that tradition. But around the world, in Siberia and Africa and South America and Central America, just all around the world, you'll find that there's native traditions connecting to lucid dreaming. So that's my brief history of lucid dreaming. I know a lot of you have questions, and so I'm going to turn this off and stop sharing here in a second. If you want to find out more about me and my books on lucid dreaming, you can always go at lucidadvice.com. I want to thank the folks at worldofluciddreaming.com. That they have a wonderful website with lots of information and all. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and we'll just open it up for questions. And there we go. Okay. So if you have a question, what I'd like you to do is just go down to the React area, and you can raise your hand like I just did. And then that way I'll know who to call on. Now, if you don't want to ask here in the program, you can chat it into the chat box and all. So, okay, here we go. And I see in the chat room, Kamran Pasha wrote, as a Sufi, I can confirm that lucid dreaming is an important practice in Sufism. And so thank you for sharing that. Okay, Don, you can unmute yourself and ask a question. Don C. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Don Caldwell. Love the book and everything. I'm a sculptor and oil painter. I've been really heavy into sacred geometry and colors, just because colors have been the only way that I've been able to depict my dreams. And geometric shapes, I usually see geometric shapes. I'm able to recognize geometric shapes within the dream realm. I don't know. I guess the question is more along the lines of how can I use my dreams to be more creative. I'm a realism painter. I'm a realism sculptor. I like to like sculpt what I see, basically. Um, is there a way, or have you heard of artists being more creative or learning while in the dream state?
Right. That's a great question, and thanks for asking. I think in my first book, Lucid Dreaming: Gateway to the Inner Self, I tell the story of this one artist, who has a really interesting name. As I recall, it's Epic Dewfall. So this guy was a lucid dreamer, and he really paid attention to his dreams, just loved the creativity and all. But what he began to do in his lucid dreams, he would announce, uh, now I want to look for art I can create. And so he'd announce, now I want to look for art I can create. And he said he would spend the entire lucid dream looking for art he could create. And he was never successful. He couldn't find art. And so then he realized that his request was the problem. He was asking to look for art. So the next time he became lucidly aware, he said, now I want to look at art I can create. And he said suddenly on nearby walls, there'd be 20 or 30 paintings just spontaneously appear. And then he would run over and examine them and try to memorize, what the painting was about. And then he would wake up and make some sketches, and then later he would paint these paintings that he had seen in his lucid dreams. And the funny thing he said was that when he would go to shows, the lucid dream art paintings, they just sold like that. They just sold very quickly. But he was really he realized something important, that he had to asked to look for art that he could, or look at art he could create instead of look for it, because looking for it, that's all he did. He went around looking for it. When he said, I want to look at it, then it appeared. So there's some great ways that you can do that. I remember one time in a lucid dream, I announced, hey dream. Basically, I'm reaching out to my unconscious mind. Hey dream, show me my life as if it was a painting. And suddenly above me, if you can imagine, there was about a 90-foot by 30-foot painting appeared just in a microsecond. And I thought, oh my God, look at that. The amount of creativity was truly fantastic. So that's how I'd suggest you go about it. When you become lucid, say, when I go into that next building, I'm going to see the most amazing artwork I can create, something like that. And then you'll see it, or just announce to the dream, hey dream, show me a piece of art that I can create. So
I know somebody got a question, but has anybody ever explained or said that they've ever gone to like the realm of like colors, like the realm of red and became red, or the realm of yellow and became yellow?
Yeah, there's a magazine I co-edit called The Lucid Dreaming Experience, which anyone can read for free at luciddreamingmagazine.com. And there was a guy probably 6 or 7 years ago, wrote an article. His name is David L. Kahn, Kahn. And he talked about, in one particular lucid dream, he became the color blue. He became the color blue. He said it was so amazing and so trippy. You'll have to read the article to see about that. But that'd be another interesting thing, to become a color within a lucid dream and see what happens.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. So I'm going to go on to Alexandra. Here we go. We're going to ask you to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Alexandra.
Oh, okay. So hello to everybody. Hello, Robert. Thank you for this little meeting. So, well, just have a few questions about well, more recent. You started a little bit with the modern science of it. So I have a question about this, and also more a general question also about the people you might you have interviewed over the years, since you have this magazine that I read, and and there is a lot of people you have been talking to over the years. And I remember, so I will start with this question, is something I always wondered about, is that there seems to be for most of the people, and I include myself in it, so that the lucid dreaming is kind of requiring an intent, an effort, a practice, and it it improves with in some period, or intense practice, or some more flowing periods. But also, I would like to have your angle on the people who seems to have them I mean, we all have them spontaneously sometimes, but maybe there is some people who don't need to do anything or it happen very often, or often without them to have to do anything, including intending them. And I remember you mentioned Laberge at the beginning. I met him a few times in the past, and I'm in France. I'm French, I'm in France. And I remember in France, it was in the early 90s, there is a guy, maybe you know him. He was one of Laber Shubzak. It's Dari Lewitt. Maybe you know him, Dari Lewitt. Yeah. And so I asked him, so do you still need to, when you do nothing, do you dream lucidly? He said, oh, no, I really need to. So I was a beginner at the time, and I was and I learned with all the techniques at that time. And he said, no, I still need to, if I don't ride the bike, the bike doesn't,
Right.
by itself. So at that time, it surprised me, but then of course it was confirmed by my own experience, because I thought with time, with years and years, it will become easier and easier. But it's not easier and easier. It's possible. I know how to do it, but I will not say it has become
Right.
easier and easier.
Right. Well, give me a moment here, and I'll answer your question. So you're right. For most of us, we really have to focus on lucid dreaming in order to make it part of our lucid dreaming life. Now, in scientific terms, to be a frequent lucid dreamer, you only have to have one lucid dream a month. And so for a lot of us, boy, one lucid dream a month, that's no problem. We can do one lucid dream a month. But I remember, so I taught myself how to lucid dream in 1975. The scientific evidence came out 1980, 1981. But by then, I had taught myself different techniques and probably got up to 5 or 6 lucid dreams a month. Then as I got into it, I kept going deeper and deeper, and you can read about it in my book, Lucid Dreaming, Plain and Simple. I developed a technique I called creating a lucid mindset. And so I did a waking practice of mindfulness. At the time I did this, people weren't even talking about mindfulness, but I did a waking practice, and all of a sudden I got up to 30 lucid dreams a month. Now, some nights I'd have 2 lucid dreams, some nights I'd have 3, and then a night I wouldn't have any lucid dreams. But I'll just explain how I did this. I was reading the works of an author here in the U.S., Jane Roberts, and she suggested in her books that the world we experience is actually a mental creation of our conscious mind and our larger self, what was basically her premise. So I began to think about that. I wasn't convinced, but I began to think about it. And so this is what I began to do. Every day when I saw anything unusual, I would ask, why am I creating this? Why am I experiencing this? So if I saw a taxi driver yelling at a woman, I'd ask myself, whoa, why am I experiencing this? Why am I seeing that? If I saw a little kid walking down the sidewalk who suddenly smiled at me, I'd ask myself, why am I experiencing this? What beliefs, ideas, emotions, how did I bring this into my life? So then here's what happened. As I began to do that all the time in my dream state, I began to do that. And, I'd see something like a camel walking down the street, and I'd go, wait a second, why did I bring a camel into my experience? And then I'd think, camel, that's too bizarre. I live in the middle of America. We don't have camels walking down the street. This is a lucid dream. And so this is how, by using this mindfulness technique during the day, that I taught myself how to become lucidly aware and got up to 30 lucid dreams. Now, I do want to say one other thing, that people also, there's some people who have lucid dreams every night. And so like one of Stephen LaBerge's #1 research people he'd bring into the lab was Beverly D'Urso. And she told me that as a young child, she had frequent nightmares. And so as a young child, in order to deal with the frequent nightmares, she taught herself how to become lucidly aware. And then she would negotiate with the witches. She would tell them, oh, don't bother me tonight because you can always see me tomorrow. Or she'd run away or fly away. But what I began to see as I talked to people all around the world, there's a lot of people who have lucid dreams every night. And normally it's the result of a childhood aspect of having frequent nightmares. They taught themselves as a child how to differentiate the dream state from the waking state, because in the dream state, there were witches or there were monsters. And so as a little kid, they learned the subtle clues of those two different states. And so they'd become lucidly aware all the time. And so one time I was giving a talk and a woman said, no, that does, she has lucid dreams all the time, and that's not her. And I said, okay, well, tell us about you. She said, she goes, I have a neurotic habit, and that's why I lucid dream. And I go, okay, what's your neurotic habit? And she said, my neurotic habit is this. About 10 times a day, I'll ask myself, what was I just doing? What was I just doing? And, oh yeah, I was folding the clothing. Oh, I was taking the dishes out of the dishwasher. And so she'd find herself in the dream and she would ask herself, what was I just doing? And she thought, I was putting on my pajamas. Oh, this must be a dream. And so she said she became lucidly aware all the time by virtue of this neurotic habit. What was I just doing? And you could also change that, like, how did I get here? Or where is this place? Where is this place? And then you go, wait, I've never been to this place before. Oh, this must be a dream. So again, there's ways of working with the mind that would allow you to increase your percentages. But I don't want to give anyone false hope. It takes work, and it takes a high degree of mindfulness to get into this. And then there's one final thing I'm going to say, but before I move on. Also, there's been some studies that suggest that people who have narcolepsy in their family tree are more likely to have lucid dreams. And if you go to narcolepsy chat boards, you'll see people having, mentioning a lot of lucid dreams. They don't do anything with it. They just think of them as strange, but nonetheless, there also seems to be a genetic component when you think about it. Yeah. So thanks for the question. What wonderful question. I'm going to move on. If you have a second follow-up question, just put it in the chat. So thanks. So Desmond, we're going to you. And here we go. Hey, Desmond.
Hello. Yes. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you just fine.
Okay. Awesome. One of my questions, I think it might be two-parted. I'm just gonna see if it gets solved in the first. But one of my main questions is do you think it's possible for people to kind of block themselves from lucidity, even if they are trying and applying mild and wild and sorry, I'm on the street. Even if they are applying various techniques, do you think it's possible that people are subconsciously or unconscious or not aware that they're blocking off their ability to find awareness in their dreams?
Right. I do. And I'll tell you what I realized. So I was going on having a lot of lucid dreams and all. And then there was a period where I just stopped. And what I realized was that the last lucid dream I had really challenged me to grow or to change. It kind of challenged some of my assumptions. And I didn't like that being challenged. And so I think on a subconscious level, I blocked myself from lucid dreaming. So sometimes I'll hear from people, oh, I was a great lucid dreamer, but 3 years ago it stopped. And so that's when I'll ask them, hey, why don't you go back 3 years ago and look at those last 1 or 2 lucid dreams and see what happened? And oftentimes you can see that there is some element of fear, there is some element of whatever that appeared, and that's what's behind why they no longer lucid dream. One time I was in Ireland giving a workshop, and a guy raised his hand and said, I quit lucid dreaming 1.5 years ago. And I said, well, was there a fearful lucid dream? And he goes, no, there's nothing like that. And then by the end of the workshop, he remembered what happened. 1.5 years ago, he and his dad sat down to watch the movie. There's a famous movie on lucid dreaming. And at the end
Oh,
of
Inception? Is it Inception?
no,
Okay, okay.
it's not Inception. It's another one. It's the one that's kind of done in kind of a cartoon fashion. I can't recall the name of it right now. Anyway, he and his father sat down to watch it. And at the end of it, his father turned to him and said, "What a bunch of rubbish." And basically just devalued lucid dreaming completely. And the guy realized that he loved his father so much that after that, he stopped lucid dreaming. And so again, sometimes there'll be some external thing, or you'll watch some video on YouTube, you know, about lucid, whatever, and there'll be something that scares you, and you just shut it down. On a subconscious level, you protect yourself, you just shut it down. So yeah, people can block themselves. Sometimes they're not even aware they're doing it. So yeah, it's
Okay.
definitely possible.
No, yeah, okay, that's really insightful, because I only bring this up because I feel like this is also a part of it. I don't want to like take up too much time, but has there also been like stories of people that have like feel like their dream self is more aware than them? And I know that's like kind of the gist of finding awareness in your sleep, but has there ever been like, for example, I'm just gonna tell a story, but I had dreams where I have like not remembered. I'll wake up, I remember that I had a dream, but in that dream, I'm almost like full level lucidity, as if it was like a dimmer switch that was fully bright, and doing things that I like would always like fathom doing, but I would kind of forget the dream, and then when I would go to write them down, I'm writing and realizing that I was doing things that like I never consciously had the skill to do, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, you know, I think that's one of the fascinating things about lucid dreaming is on occasion when we become lucidly aware, we find ourselves in an expanded state of mind, you know, kind of more acutely aware than we are normally in the waking state. So we'll find sometimes that happens. Other times, of course, we'll you know, have interesting things happen that are outside of our own knowing. But for example, you know, I've seen words in a foreign language in lucid dreams that Robert Waggoner doesn't know anything about that foreign language. But when I wake up with the knowledge of it and type it into Google Translate, then suddenly it answered the question that I asked in the lucid dream, even though it's in a foreign language. So again, I think what it shows is that the unconscious or the larger awareness that we're all a part of is much vaster than we ever realize. So thanks, Desmond, and good luck with your exploration into lucid dreaming.
Thank you for answering.
Super. Yeah, so I'm going to go to I'm going to go to a question here in the chat. Chris asked, has anyone else had a shared lucid dream which turned into astral travel with a loved one, which you both remembered in the morning? So in my book, my first book, Lucid Dreaming Gateway to the Inner Self, I have an entire chapter on what you could call mutual lucid dreams. Dreams where both parties were consciously aware of dreaming and in the morning could compare notes. And the notes are basically very similar. You know, for example, I might call that, oh, we were by a lake, and the other person go, no, we were by a river. And I go, well, how do you know it was a river and just not a big lake? And they go, oh, because after we left each other, I went exploring and flew up along the way and realized it was a river. And so, but you can see that things line up quite a bit. I remember one time there was a funny one that I had, which was this. I became lucidly aware and walked into a restaurant, and I was sitting at the table and just admiring the detail in the lucid dream. Like in the salt shaker, I could see the individual crystals of salt. And I thought, boy, this lucid dream, look at the detail here. And then through the door comes my friend, Maureen. Everyone calls her Mo. So Mo comes through the door of the restaurant. And I run up to her and I say, Mo, this is a dream. We're dreaming this. And here's what's funny. She had rapid eye movement. Her eyes were just moving all over the place. And I realized at that moment that she's in her own dream and has somehow stumbled into my lucid dream. And so I think, how can I get her to become lucid? And so I grab her around the waist and I start floating, and I float higher and higher and higher in the lucid dream. And I say, look, Mo, we're floating. This is a dream. We're dreaming this. And again, just rapid eye movement. She is not becoming lucidly aware at all. She just had rapid eye movement. So then I thought, boy, what can I do now? And so here's what I did. I put my fingers in a peace sign like that, and I shoved it right in front of her face. And I said, Mo, do you see this peace sign? You can use it as a sign to help you become lucidly aware anytime you want. And so after that, I felt kind of frustrated because she still had rapid eye movement, and I just decided to wake up and write this down. So she lives out in the San Francisco Bay Area. I live in the Midwest, and I thought she'd give me a call or send me an email, but nothing. So I never brought it up to her. I never told anyone. About 3 or 4 months later, I'm out in San Francisco on a business trip, and I realize I have some free time. And so I call up Mo and I say, hey, Mo, I'm going to be in your suburb at lunch. Would you like to get together for lunch? And she goes, oh, yeah, I'll meet you on Main Street at such and such a place, and we'll have lunch there. So now, here in waking reality, I'm standing outside the restaurant, and here comes Mo walking down the sidewalk. And before she says hello to me or anything, she suddenly puts her fingers in a peace sign and shoves it in my face, just like I had done in the lucid dream to her. And I asked her, I said, Mo, why are you doing this? And she says, I don't know. I just felt like it. So again, this would suggest that in that lucid dream, I passed on something to her. I shoved, the peace sign in front of her and told her she could use it to become lucid. And then 3 months later in waking reality, when I saw her next, she does the same thing to me, but she did it based on subconscious knowing, and she didn't even know why she was doing that. So again, there does seem to be shared lucid dreams. Sometimes one person is aware and the other person is semi-aware. There are examples of lucid dreamers who have dreamed the same setting and that sort of thing. So probably the most extensive report of it, you'll find in my first book, Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self. I have an entire chapter on it, and a lot about the investigation of this by Ed Kellogg, who's a very talented lucid dreamer, and some of the things that he learned by virtue of shared lucid dreams. Let me see. Yeah, there also we have some other examples that people have put in the chat about that. So Tharcilo put, is it true that after several lucid dreams, our mind learns to thwart our reality checks, causing us to mistakenly conclude that we are not dreaming, thus losing the opportunity to become lucid in the dream? Okay, is that true? And that is absolutely not true. That's a belief. And that's one thing that you learn in lucid dreaming. So again, I taught myself how to lucid dream before the scientific evidence emerged. And so I began to see how important our beliefs are. If you believe, like some people have told me, that, oh, they can only fly at the height of 5 or 6 feet, then that belief is true for them. In their lucid dreams, they can only fly 5 or 6 feet high. They can't go any higher. And why is that? Because they believe it. They expect it. And so if you believe or expect that after several lucid dreams, your mind will thwart your reality checks, then you'll find that to be the case. But it is absolutely not true, because you can find tons of lucid dreamers who have had hundreds of lucid dreams because of reality checks, and their mind never thwarted them. But if you start to believe that kind of thought, then your mental belief can thwart your ability to lucid dream and can also thwart reality checks to work for you. Okay. Don C asked, where is the article about the artist that became the color blue? So what you want to do is go to our magazine website, luciddreamingmagazine.com. And unfortunately, you're really going to have to search. We have the past issues, but we have 20 years of this magazine that's free for anyone to look at. You know, I wish I had that right in front of me, but I'm going to guess that it was about 10 years ago. So I would start 10 years ago and just start clicking on the magazines, and you can read the table of contents, and you'll see the article by David L. Kahn, K-A-H-N. Okay. Chris put one lucid dream every 30 years or so, but I get far more astral travel experiences. You know, that's interesting. I think a lot of us in those early days, I remember, so I was a teenager, and some nights as I'm falling asleep, I hear all this humming and buzzing, and I feel all this weird energy around myself. And then I'd notice I was seeing the bedroom from 5 or 6 feet above my bed. Of course, nowhere in there do you realize within a dream you're dreaming, so it doesn't meet the definition of a lucid dream. But I can remember just not liking the experience. And so I know on occasion I have OBEs, but since I don't care for them, I basically turn to lucid dreaming, which I find easier and all that. Okay. So Alexander put another question, was about Ursula Voss, who alleged a high likelihood of inducing lucid dreams with an electric impulse on the scalp, even for non-lucid dreamers. You know, when you see researchers, I go to the International Association for the Study of Dreams conferences. There's going to be one here in June in the Netherlands. So if you go to asdreams.org or .com, you'll see the International Association for the Study of Dreams. But anyway, a lot of researchers and lucid dreamers and just regular people go there. But some of the researchers said that it's been very difficult to replicate what Ursula Voss and her partners allege, that you could zap some person with 40 hertz of electricity at a certain part on their scalp and get them to become lucidly aware. And let's say even if you became lucidly aware for 1 second, I mean, like, you know, so what can you do in 1 second? But these people said that people are having a hard time replicating this, and so they're beginning to wonder if it's actually true. And so I would say that's still being under consideration. So Cameron notes that, yes, I've had difficulty flying in lucid dreams due to my own beliefs against it. It's funny, I was reading one of the early newsletters by the Lucidity Institute that Stephen LaBerge created back in the 1980s, as I recall. And there was a lucid dream in there by a person who said that they became lucidly aware and they started to fly. But then they'd get way too high and they'd look down and think, oh no, I've gotten too high. And then they would come falling all the way back down. And then they'd think, wait a second, this is a dream. I can do whatever I want. And they'd start flying really high again. And then they'd look down and get a little bit frightened. And then they'd come plummeting back to Earth. And so after they did this one more time, a non-visible voice in the lucid dream said these words to them: doubt is gravity. So think about that. In a lucid dream, there's no such thing as gravity. Gravity is part of the physical experience, apparently, unless, of course, you're in outer space and then you're free of gravity. And so this voice said, doubt is gravity. It said that basically the reason you're having this experience of going up and down is your doubt, your fear. And so that's why in my books, I try to explain to people all the psychological principles that you have to master in order to become good at lucid dreaming. Because a lot of times, all that's being reflected back to you is your own belief and expectation. That's not the limits of lucid dreaming, because you can change your beliefs, you can change your expectations, and then as a result, have different kinds of lucid dreams. So again, there's a lot to learn, but thanks for sharing that. Okay, Layla Vox, you don't know how to raise your hand, so I'm going to ask you to unmute. And now you can unmute and ask a question.
Thank you very much. I don't know, I haven't lucid dreamed in a long time, but I was really, really into it several years ago, and we were in contact with each other on Facebook. And I had a lucid dream one night where I was flying, I was practicing flying through an Asian restaurant. And I think I was in an Asian restaurant because I had just eaten at an Asian restaurant with a friend. And I was in an upstairs room flying, and I saw you. I saw you at the top of the stairs, talking to a guy, or rather the guy was talking to you, and he was going blah 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 blah. He didn't stop talking, and you were being very polite. And I flew over to you and I said, "Robert Waggoner, I'm in a lucid dream. I'm lucid dreaming." I was so excited about it. And I wrote to you, and then I flew away because you were busy and did something else, and jumped off a dragon's head out the window and flew and did stuff. Anyway, later I contacted you on Facebook and told you about the dream. And you told me that at that time you had been in a conference and you did remember one guy pretty much talking your ear off. So I just thought that was really interesting because you had talked about mutual lucid dreams before. So
right. Yeah, that's an interesting story. Thanks for sharing it. It's interesting. A number of people who have read my books or whatever have written to me and told me about how just seeing me in a dream allowed them to become lucidly aware. And also, so I think for some people, I've become a dream symbol of lucidity. There's probably lots of people who become lucidly aware when they saw Stephen LaBerge or Keith Earn or somebody like that. But no, that's a wonderful story. I know some people out there will be saying, well, was that an actual encounter or not?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think the way, if a person wants to approach, this kind of investigation rationally, if you got, let's say in this particular case, that she obtained some information outside of her knowing about me, or asked me like, Robert, what's your birthday? Or Robert, what's your middle name? Or Robert, what's the name of your first pet, or whatever, and heard me respond, and in the morning sent that to me, and I could confirm or not, the validity. Lucid dreaming allows us that capacity to do that kind of investigation. And there's been examples where people have been able to do that. And there's also been examples where they haven't been able to do that. So it's interesting. There is a way to confirm whether the meeting apparently connected in the dream state or not, and it'd be by getting that kind of valid information.
I have a second quick question, since we're on the subject of validating things, but and I read it in your book and I can't remember what the signs were, but you were talking in the book about how you can tell the difference between an actual visit from a departed loved one or or you having conjured this meeting yourself. And I'm going to mute myself again because that'll be my last question.
Okay. Yeah, so in my first book, Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self, I have an entire chapter on interacting with deceased dream figures. And so again, dream figures vary, and some of them are symbols or projections of our mind, but some of them seem to be quite knowledgeable, and they know things that you don't, or they can show you things that you're not aware of, or they can pass on information that's outside of your own knowing, but you can wake up with. And so, like I recall when my father passed away 20 some years ago, that first week I would dream that he and I were at the TWA counter and at the airport, and I'd become lucidly aware because I realized, oh, Dad died last week or something. But in those lucid dreams, my dad seemed empty. He just sat there, no conversation, none of that. And when I'd wake up, I realized that, oh, that was probably my dad as just a symbol of my mind, because I'm kind of focused that he just passed away last week. And also I thought it was funny that we were at the TWA counter, because we all know that TWA stands for Trans World Airlines. And so I think this was kind of symbolically helping me get to the point that, oh, my dad is transitioning and no longer in the waking world. He's in the trans world. He's moving elsewhere. So about 6 months later, I became lucid, and I thought, oh, I'm going to go find my dad. But then all the dream figures told me not to. And I asked them why. And they told me it's not time yet. It's not time. And because they were all in unanimous opinion, I decided, okay, I'm not going to go find my dad. And then I made the dream figures explain all the symbols in the dream. I would just point at things and say, okay, what does that represent? And they would explain exactly what the dream symbols meant. And it was really a fascinating lucid dream. So then when I woke up, I thought, okay, if my dad wants to come to me, he can come to me whenever he's ready. And so it's probably about 3 years later, one night, I see this ladder, and coming down the ladder is my dad. And I immediately become lucidly aware, because I think, oh, he passed away 3 years ago. And then I started to think, well, wait a second, is this my dad as a dream figure, or is this my dad as a visitor, from the land of the deceased? And so I thought, okay, I'm going to check into that. He came down, we greeted each other, and I said, Dad, you're from the land of the dead. When do you think Mom's going to pass away? And he said, oh, probably in 2 to 6 years. I said, of what? He said a heart condition. And that really surprised me, because my mom had never had any heart trouble, and she was 10 years younger than my dad. And then I asked him one more question, and he answered it. And then he said, I want you to please be quiet, because I have things to tell you. And then he spent the next 10 minutes basically telling me things about the family that he wanted me to be aware of. And so then, we said goodbye, and I woke up and started writing all this down. And I realized that that I'd have to wait 2 years to see if he was correct about my mom. And it was interesting, about 23 months later, my mom went to the hospital and almost died of a heart condition. And then about 3 years after that, she went back to the hospital and almost died of a heart condition, because she'd been taking a prescribed medicine that they later realized was actually harming people's hearts and actually killing people. But she made it through that 2 to 6 year period, and eventually, about 20 years later, passed away of a heart attack. So again, there I was able to get information outside of my own knowing. My dad told me probably 2 to 6 years. And that's one thing that I want to say, that I really view time as probable, that your future is probable depending upon the decisions that you make and the responses to things. You determine your own fate and all. But that just gives you, one example of interacting with the deceased, and also seeing if they have information outside of your own knowing. So I hate to do this, but I told World of Lucid Dreaming that we would be done at the end of the hour. I think they're going to make this recording available for folks who registered and all. And so, I just want to thank everyone for coming and being part of all of this. Again, I'm Robert Waggoner. If you want to learn more about me, please go to lucidadvice.com. If you want to check out my different techniques of becoming lucidly aware, then you'll find that in my second book, Lucid Dreaming Gateway, or Lucid Dreaming Plain and Simple. If you want to see my kind of take on how deep you can take lucid dreaming, then check out my book, Lucid Dreaming Gateway to the Inner Self. And if you want to find out more about what the world of luciddreaming.com is doing, then go to world-of-lucid-dreaming.com, and you can see all the things and activities that they're involved in. So thanks, everyone. I appreciate the questions, and hopefully we can do this in another month or two. So keep checking out World of Lucid Dreaming website or online at Facebook and see how it goes. So thanks very much. Bye-bye.